Hello and welcome everybody. Today is the 14th of October 2018 and I'm Dr. Katherine Horton. With me is Melanie Vritschan, President of the human rights charity ICATOR. And today's episode will be an update about the scanning that we did in Brussels, which is a couple of weeks back in the middle of September. And we just received the results and we would like to discuss them. But I'll pass the microphone first to Melanie so that she can actually tell you what the whole story was about. Hi, Melanie.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. Good evening, Catherine. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So it's good to be here again. And indeed, as Catherine already said, we have some news because we got just this week the results from the measurements we did with the university we're working in collaboration with. And what we can say is that there are still a lot of questions that have to be tackled and that we need answers for. I will quickly show, just so that you really see that what we're saying here is true. This is part of the report that we got, and these are the graphs. It only says test person 1 and 2 because Catherine and I were there working with the professors because it was meant as a calibration scanning, a test scanning, so to speak. Yeah, we have various questions. For one thing, is for sure that is also the conclusion of the university, is that we need further investigations, that there were peaks and anomalies that cannot be explained without further investigation. But we, Catherine can also say it from her opinion later. We have further questions. For example, I remember that whilst I was in the Frederic cage, the person who scanned told me that there were a lot of radiation peaks, and in the report we find that these are not mentioned. There was one thing. Then he also interpreted various results as something, well, where we have questions. For example, I know that Catherine, and she can explain this later, told me that at one point he had explained to her that he subtracted a camera that he thought was present during for the filming of these scans, which in my case, which was not present at that time. There was no camera. So we have various questions about the results and also about the methodology. And we would like to offer something different I mean, do it differently in the future. And we also have been contacted by other universities that offer this scanning project to us. And that is also a collaboration which we would like to pursue, or would at least look into, because we need scientific results, and we need them, if possible, also from various universities, so that we can compare. This was, briefly. Maybe Catherine, you would like to add something about it, because you also were left with a couple of questions receiving these results that you had.
Yeah, and left with a couple of questions is really putting it mildly. I mean, yeah, I know that the university is trying their best, but personally, I have some big issues with the measurements, and I think we need to drive a completely different strategy from now on. To explain what Melanie was referring to, imagine we have, so just to also put it into context, we had 3 measurements that took us literally a year and a half to pull together because of the attacks, because we had to do crowdfunding for the measurements and so on. So 3 measurements in a year and a half for me already, considering that we are dealing with victims who are being literally tortured and mutilated to death, is not a rate I want to see. I would like to see 3 measurements in a week, not in a year and a half. But anyway, this is what was the best that we could do. But then imagine you're waiting for I think there was almost a year between the second and the final measurement now.
11 months, exactly.
Yeah, 11 months. And then I also keep in mind I have to travel from Zurich to Brussels every single time. So, you know, it's a lot of effort for us to actually get there and be there. And so what I discovered in the second scanning, so we had a very first scanning in May 2017, so a year and a half ago. And that was the first scanning. I think we measured 11 people. It took, I think, a month and a half to get the results. And then it turned out that indeed there were signals after subtracting the background. There was still some very curious signals left, way above background, that needed further investigation. So what was also curious in the first result is that there were frequencies coming from my body, but in Melanie's case, Melanie being extremely tortured with already previously measured frequencies that were measured already in another Faraday cage a while back, her results came out flat. Nothing could be seen in the first measurement. So that was already curious. So we went back and we investigated. And in the second measurement, just on the by, as I was working with the postdoc in the Faraday cage and Melanie was waiting outside, he mentioned that he subtracted by hand frequencies he had measured above background. And this is a measurement, this is a subtraction by hand that did not appear in the measurement protocol, which already, for me as an experimental scientist, I'm already hitting the roof over that. But then just by the by, I get to hear that he subtracted that by hand. And the reason he subtracted it is because at the first measurement, we had a documentary film crew that was accompanying us, and it's in preparation for a documentary about these crimes. And he thought that the camera was still active outside the room, outside the Faraday cage. Now, the suppression factor of the Faraday cage is stupendous. So anyway, subtracting it based on that explanation already and then not mentioning it in the report is a capital crime for an experimental scientist already. But then it turned out that actually there wasn't even a camera because these people had already left by the time Melanie was being measured. So in other words, the first measuring results have been effectively falsified. And suddenly it made all sense because I did expect that Melanie should show some frequencies because we know she's our calibration flame. We know she has these chips and we have been measuring them in different modes, including thermal images, so independent modes of measurements. And it just didn't make sense. And then add to that the reason why the postdoc concluded it must be due to a camera is because those frequencies are licensed for the broadcast of audio-visual information. Now, when you have somebody with chips in their eyes and, you know, audio transmissions and all sorts, when you have a standard intelligence agency victim, you have exactly this profile. You always get visual and audio information along with the radio frequency chips in most cases. So you just cannot come to this conclusion just like that. And most importantly, you cannot just omit it from the report. So anyway, this was the second measurement. So we went back and as we announced, it was specifically with the aim of working out a measurement protocol. But I went to Brussels with the aim of, we have already established that we have chips. And by different means, including doctors' certificates for laser surgery scars. And now we're going back and we want to measure the frequency. And now I would like to talk about the technical details because I think it's, so the bottom line is after the last experience, I've taken a decision that we need to diversify. Okay, we should have done it anyway, but now we need to step up the you know, the efforts because I want competition for this university so that they really get themselves into gear because this is really not the best that they can offer. So at the last meeting, we wanted to set up a measurement protocol and first of all, we were doing all these measurements on a so-called max hold. So you have these measuring devices, and if you're in a Faraday room, all sorts of frequencies are, you know, hitting you, maybe from the outside. The dampening factor of the Faraday cage is not perfect. In the cage where we were in, there was also a window that just had a rough Faraday a grid, you know. Yeah. And but very so the grid spacing was the thickness of my finger, so not even a fine meshing. So anyway, so you do have some frequencies inside, And then the postdoc claimed that there were standing waves and we had to worry about standing waves. So you get this phenomenon of standing waves. You know it may be from a bathtub or a swimming pool. If there's a wave machine, at some point the wave stays put and just goes up and down. At one point in the swimming pool, if the frequency is such that it's matched to the size of the swimming pool. So instead of traveling waves, you just stay there bobbing up and down on one wave. That's a standing wave. Now you have the same thing with electromagnetic frequencies, but if you have significant standing waves inside a room, you should be able to measure that. And yet we did not measure that effect. When you have this problem of standing waves, one way to do that is to take them as a background and then subtract it along with the background. But for that, you have to fix your antenna. And the way, because it has to be always at the same point relative to the standing wave established in the room. Instead, what we had was that this postdoc took the antenna and he insisted on just waving it around the person for the duration of the measurement. Now, I don't agree with that because, first of all, I have told the postdoc that one thing we have established about these body implants is that they seem to emit in one direction, in one plane. So when you have the bug detector and you have the little antenna of the bug detector, which I'll represent with this pen, it depends if you have the antenna like this or like this or like this. And when you measure for example, the head chips at the back of the head and the neck are usually very strong. When you measure that, and when you first find the chip, you will notice that the bug detector's intensity will drop if you change the angle, okay? So when you have these sort of effects, it really doesn't help if you want to detect these frequencies for the first time that you're waving your antenna around. And if you're saying that on top of that, you have the problem of standing waves. So I made this suggestion that we should fix the antenna in the room and do measurements with the antenna fixed. And then the person would be sitting in front of the antenna, maybe with the back of their head, the antenna next to their back of their head, and then we would do two measurements, one in this direction, the antenna like that, and one at right angles as a first approximation. But I am all about standardizing measurements and ideally conducting the same type of measurements around the world as one standard measurement so that we can use the results comparably in court. We cannot do this when the antenna is being waved around, okay? And we cannot do this if there's no measurements, for any standing waves, should standing waves be a concern. And most importantly, we cannot do these measurements and use them for court if there are subtractions done by hand, which are not mentioned in the protocol. So for these reasons, I'm extremely unhappy. And again, we have now the third result, which again comes out after waiting for a year and a half, saying, yes, that there are some effects and they need further investigation. Well, it was the further investigation that we traveled to Brussels for to start with. So anyway, what I'm going to do, I just have to find the little sheet of paper where I've written it down in all the mess here after I moved house. But I would like to publish the precise make and not serial number, but the make and the model number of the measuring devices that we've used in Brussels. And I would like also to ask people who are concerned about body implants to contact other universities and ask to use their Faraday cages and tap the expertise of other scientists. So as Melanie already mentioned, we got requests from other universities and other countries to conduct these measurements, and I think that is the way forward. This is something I strongly support. But we also need to start two things. Number one, learn from all these and find out where the actual points of concern are. For example, standing waves, how we're going to subtract them as a background, how we're going to deal with them. And then the second thing, which I think also should not be underestimated, we need to start putting pressure on these universities. Because frankly, I am not happy with the standard at the moment. Anyway, this is really frustrating because right now we still don't have a protocol that we can just expand and just say, okay, we're going into production. And that's really bad because we have court cases waiting for these measurements. So anyway, so when Melanie and I read the report, we kind of hit the roof a little bit because this is not acceptable, really. you know, given the financial investment that the donors made, and also that we made personally, and the investment in time. And I personally, I'm sick of reading these wishy-washy reports saying, yes, well, there could be something, but further investigations need to be done. You know, we really have to nail this now, finally. And anyway, so we still don't have even a confirmation if there are any signals. And now we are working with the university to find out exactly why. Because on the day, both Melanie and I, our headships were being worked to cripple us. And as is usually the case when we're trying to run an investigation, we are being assaulted and absolutely mauled by the secret services using the body implants. So we're being raped, we're being burned, we're being crippled, we're being neurologically impaired by these bastards. And at the same time, we get these measuring the results saying, oh, well, nothing could be established with some of the most expensive measuring devices. This is just blatantly not true when both of us have measured our body implants with a bug detector for $120. So this is just not good enough. So anyway.
Yeah, as Katherine said, all of these questions will now be addressed.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. And we will ask them all of this question, ask for an explanation, and we really will make the point that we need to step up the pace, that we really need to work more thoroughly here, and look into various possibilities how we need to measure, and that this is really, you know, we're running out of time, so to speak. I mean, these are war crimes. These are crimes against humanity. So we need to, you know, step it up a bit. And I totally agree with Katherine that we also, and we got these requests. We, quite frankly, I would like to do this work with various other universities. This is why we need to fundraise once again, because I would like to not only compare this data and their way of working, and the way that the measurements are done and the results, but also to put them a little bit into competition, quite frankly. So this is why we have already been contacted by at least one university in another European country that would like to work with us. This is why, well, we're asking for funding one more time so we can continue the investigations. But we really need to look into how we can be more effective, and so that we don't lose time and effort and money anymore, and we can finally do what I really wanted to do, and what the project was all about, to establish a production line to have all our members scanned. And maybe we need to also look into doing these measurements ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I mean, quite frankly, this has been a learning curve, but I mean, we there's a saying in French where we say you're always best served when you serve yourself. Well, maybe that's true, and maybe that's something we have to look into, and also to cut out costs, basically, because we cannot go on fundraise for these measurements and pay this kind of fee, quite frankly.
Yeah,
So.
exactly. I mean, we now had, you know, what was it, 600 euros for, you know, it was from 10 o'clock to, you know, 1 p.m. or what it is. And okay, but then for 600 euros, I do expect, you know, top class measurements. And what really bothers me, and this is something that really irks me, is that at the time I did raise these concerns, and I made the proposition that we should fix the measurement. And it was a fight to even just get there. And at the moment, I cannot see the comparison, you know, of two separate sets of measurements. For example, the one with waving around the measurement antenna, and the one where it's fixed and trying to do some sort of, you know, systematized measurement. So I'm absolutely not happy. I have requested the raw data, and I shall be looking at it myself. And what has been mentioned in the project report about the actual, you know, algorithm, if you like, the calculation that was used to arrive at these plots is absolutely simple. I can teach people how to do that using Excel. And what I really want to do is I want to break down the entire measurement process, so that for sure you can take this sort of procedure and go and suggest it to your, your local university if they have a Faraday cage and these measuring devices, or else at least just give it as an initial proposal for the professor. And if he's got a better method, he's more than welcome to actually try it and show us the results. And I think this is what we need to work for. But so the next steps is I have requested the raw data. I will be looking at it. I'll try to salvage as much as I can, if you like. I'll try to find out if there's anything that has been removed by hand. And then I'll try to really pin this down. But one of the big fears I have when you are not doing the measurements yourself is that certain government pressures will be entered and will be made to bear on these people. For example, if you're measuring a set of frequencies and some of them are military radar frequencies, I think, or at least licensed for military purposes and military telecommunication, then your university professor might be tempted to remove them under, claiming national security. And all along, these frequencies, of course, they have been licensed by the military, but they're actually for body-to-body communication, right? For brain-to-computer interfaces and stuff like that. Of course, there would be some military frequencies. So if you want to measure those coming from your body for court, you need to have complete control and sovereignty over your own data. That is the first thing. And this is something that I don't feel has been, 100% guaranteed here. So anyway, the way that it should be done, so if you imagine these measuring devices, they are, okay, fancy measuring devices, but it's at the end, the fanciness is inside the black box, and you have a measuring antenna. The way I would propose that we do it is that we fix the antenna. We try to get the people, close to the antenna, but in a sort of standardized position, maybe focusing first on the back of the head. Just to get some sort of initial results. But then when these measuring devices are calculating the results, ultimately there's a USB slot and you can pull the data in text format even out, and then you can read it into an Excel data sheet. So any sort of correction you will do to columns of numbers. Now that's easy, okay? We could even do that by hand if we were pressed to. So if we just standardize the method, then every victim should be able to see that, okay, this is the data set that was just collected from my body. This is the USB stick it goes into. Here's the laptop. This is the USB stick being read out. This is the column of numbers goes into this Excel sheet, and here are the results. And in principle, every victim should, in my view, walk out with the raw data, with the Excel sheet that was used to calculate it, and with the final plots and then the final report. Having the full, what I would call the DAC chain, the data acquisition chain, and having full control over it, knowing exactly what went into it. I think this is exactly what we need for court. But
speaking about DAC or DACs, we really need to get our DACs in a row now and get ready for these court cases. So it's really important that we sort this out with this university, but that we also look into collaboration with others. So we once again need your donations. We need your support that we can do these further investigations. And also, quite frankly, to obtain the raw data, there's also a financial element with. We have more pressure if we, can say, well, we don't pay you until we get this data, basically, and we really need to sort this out and look into this and really understand what has happened, and maybe there are valid explanations for the results. But we need to understand exactly what was interpreted, how, and what was subtracted, why. All these questions are on the table. They have to be discussed with these people very, very firmly. And then we also need to, because we need to move on, look into other collaborations with other universities so that we can do the investigations with them if we need, and if we feel that we have better success there, or maybe this university will get more into gear also if they feel that there's a competition. So Katherine, if you don't mind, if you could show once again our donation page, and so we would like to ask people to support us once more, so we can continue with these investigations. And I will also look into what Katherine just explained to find a way that we can cut the costs. And one way would be indeed that we do these measurements ourselves, that we're just using the facilities. This is
Absolutely. I mean, I should say I've just thrown a glance into the chat, and somebody says, "Oh, looks like you got ripped off." Well, this is one way to see it, but then you have to keep in mind that we are approaching a university with, we're asking them to reverse engineer and do fundamental research in a topic that's highly political, right? That is at the root of war crimes that are being conducted and committed by their own governments, and it's those governments paying the universities the research grants. Right? So this is what we're actually dealing with. And yes, one can be ripped off. Frankly, when we talked to the professor and even to the postdoc, I did not have the initial gut feeling that they were actually trying to cheat us. Never, at no point. But, you know, when my scientific input is not taken on board, I do start to get very impatient, because this is just not what I'm used to at CERN, okay? So I do have also a long track record from science, and I do understand what high scientific and experimental standards are, and they were just not met. So, you know, but anyway, we will try to salvage this. And I'm pretty sure that there must be something in the data that we can recover already if we got that very first data set. Okay, so in the meantime, I understand the frustration and all this, but just, you know, understand that what we're doing is incredibly hard. And you do have to fight the kind of personal doubt that people have. You have to fight government pressures. You just have to fight, you know, whatever, human inertia, trying to tackle difficult projects and so on. We're literally doing the best we can. However,
also civilians basically fighting military grade technology.
Yeah.
I mean, with the possibilities of investigations we have, and we're looking for the collaborations we can get to establish this proof. And I mean, what Katherine just said is true. I mean, you know, universities, of course, the government basically owns them, so of course can be put under pressure. We're not saying that this is necessarily what happened here, but we need to look into this. We need to further investigate, and we also need to look into other collaborations, and we need to look into more efficient ways to establish these results. And all this has to be discussed with these universities and others in future. So yeah, so you know, exactly. We're doing our best, really we can, with the possibilities we have, but and also we live and learn. So yeah. None of us is a specialist in doing these measurements. I mean, you know, we learned by doing, basically.
Yeah. And somebody just said that we should put our money together and buy what we need to prove our cases, put our knowledge and skills together to reach the goal. I think this is a very, very good comment, and I think this is exactly what we should be working towards. So one of the things, the way I would like to contribute is I would like to make public what exact devices we used. And building a good Faraday cage is not easy, but it can be done. If you have some sort of insight, if you are, you know, an electrical engineer, or you have experience with measurements, you can do it yourself. If this is really the, you know, the goal that you set yourself, and you're combining your efforts with others. So this is one step. I don't want the university to have the monopoly over the means of production, if you like, the monopoly over the means of making the measurements. So anyway, this is what's gonna come. In the meantime, let me just share my screen and show you that, hang on, this is the comments. This is the ICATOR website, and here under join us if you are in Europe. The quickest way to donate is to go and pay a direct bank transfer by direct bank transfer, and the bank details are here. And if you are outside Europe or the Eurozone, there's GoFundMe here on the other tab, and then you can go to donate now. And the only caveat is that I think GoFundMe keeps 5% of the donations. But anyway, so this is on ICATOR.be. That's the website. And as I said, so we just have to continue. And the annoying thing is that there are always just running costs that Melanie has, and she also has costs to do with the court case that she's fighting for all of us. And we just have to, keep going forward. But one of the things that I find extremely important is really the diversification. So making it, I'm always about transparency, making it public, everything that we do and how we did it, what measurements we used, and then just encourage other people to come forward. Because I also think there must be a lot of scientists and engineers being targeted. So I think the comment was very true. We all need to put our expertise, to bear on this problem. And this is what I'm personally trying to do, but I'm also, and I've got my hands bound in a sense because I do not have a Faraday cage. And I did invest 1,500 euros in a Faraday net that's sold by Aronia. But it's not enough. It was enough actually to find our body chips, funnily enough, with the bug detector and the Aronia Faraday cage for Melanie and me. Okay, so this is something that I find very irksome, that Melanie and we have already done these measurements. We even filmed them and we showed them to the university. And how can it be that we are in a professional Faraday room with professional measuring devices and it all comes out flat? It is just not possible. Especially after both Melanie and we have doctor certificates for surgery scars. Okay, now how can this be? How can this be?
Yeah,
So,
and especially in my case, we had already, measured me in another Faraday cage by another university, and maybe I should recontact them again because they were very interested in this project. And but there we used our own measurements devices and we did our own measurements, and we just had them checked, we had them read by the professor there, who confirmed that for him this is scientific evidence. For people non-consensually implanted. And and there the measurements were clearly positive. So it was absolute proof. So there's no reason why with this university where we have this very professional measurement devices and surroundings and a Faraday room, we could not come to the same results. So either we need to work more on a really consciousness that this is really a valuable scientific project, and that these are really crimes against humanity that are going on, and that we really must put more effort into proving this, and or we must look, or I would say, or we need to look into other collaborations with other universities and put them a little bit, in competition, and and see what we get this way.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree. And I'm also reading the chats, and there are people sending sarcastic messages and saying, oh, no, you've been done over. Well, not quite, because at least we did have the first measurement report, and that already showed, odd signals that needed further investigation. So it's not quite like that. And at least we have done the groundwork. And with these super cynics, I'm always very intrigued to find out what exactly they are doing, trying to help all the victim communities. Because remember that both Melanie and we started from nothing, and we had to pull this up ourselves. So the fact that, we're here and we're talking about it is already a long way further on than, we were not that long ago. So what we really need
we
is...
also had the concern of being totally transparent. We
Yeah.
told you every step of the way what we're doing, what would be the next step, and now last time we told you that we were waiting for the results that we have now gotten. So we're just communicating them and communicating also our points of concerns or things that need to be further investigated. And I would like to point out that even in this report that we got, this time, I don't know if people can see it. The final conclusion is still that there were signals, that there were abnormalities, and that the investigation needs to go on. So it's not as if it was negative, or if it was a total loss of our time and money. But sure, we are not happy with the pace, and we still have questions, and we need to find a more clear and efficient way of doing these. and less costly and more cost effective, and that takes us less time also. But you know, we're on a learning curve. As Katherine said, we started this from scratch, and so it's not as if we would have totally been ripped off and done over. But we need to clarify certain questions, and we need to look how we can do this more efficiently in future. That is for sure. So we just want to be transparent.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. Anyway, so this is the current status, and we just received the measuring report. I think it was on Friday that we received it.
Yes.
So the first time we actually wanted to go live on Friday, but it didn't come together, so we had to do it today. And yes, so I think the way forward is we're trying to, number one, we're trying to get the raw data from this university. Number two, we're trying to go back and do our own measurements using their Faraday cage and hopefully their measuring devices, and maybe come to another arrangement where we can have much more control over the measurement. And then what should run alongside is also the diversification to other universities and other Faraday cages. And I keep reiterating, just as Melanie said, the existence of these RF body implants and the existence of the criminality of illegally implanting it non-consensually in people has already been established years and years and years ago. And the evidence for that is just mounting and mounting and mounting. And what we are really after here are the precise chip frequencies, so that we can look up who has licensed those frequencies. This is what this project is actually about. We are way past actually just proving the existence of RFID chips and the fact that it's in our bodies, because it has already been shown by other means. So when this university struggles to even establish the mere existence, then either, you know, they're being rather clumsy or something is holding them back. And, you know, there's only so many things one can do about any. And at some point, I think if there's a brick wall placed in your path, you can try to climb over it, or you try to just go around it. And going around it would be you guys now starting to contact your universities and really networking. I mean, guys, at the end of the day, in every city of Europe and the US, there should be thousands of victims. How hard can it be for somebody else to also contact all the universities and find the Faraday cages and set up a project like that, you know? So this is what I really, really want to have. We really need many, many measurement centers around Europe that we can finally roll up this criminality. And we cannot wait for government.
And what I would like to add, because you said, well, it's established. These implants are established. As you know, it's not are they doing it, but how to prove it scientifically, basically. And in my case, and many others, it has already been proven, including in a Faraday cage. What is the good news is that we have really more and more people that actually have the ear of the government that contact us. I've just seen, after the first documentary In Search of Mind Control, where there was the court case of James Walbert shown, where he was non-consensually implanted and he won his court case. There's just been another documentary that came out. I think it's called Generation Z, Generation Zapping, or so, Zapped, which somebody sent to me today. And there was Professor Ole Johansson from the Karolinska Institute in Sweden, which is Europe's most prestigious university, who was one of our speakers also at the Covert Harassment conference. He was here just in Brussels for a congress, well, on electro-hypersensitivity. But I mean, I suspect that many of these so-called electro-hypersensitive people are also victims of non-consensual implantation. So he was speaking there. He was taking this subject very seriously. Otherwise, he would not have been one of our key speakers at our conference, at the Covert Harassment conference. This is one thing for once. And also, I've been contacted recently by a Belgian intelligence whistleblower who totally confirms the use of non-consensual implants, the use of psychotronic weapons against certain citizens. So he has totally confirmed this, and is also ready to testify to this in court. So, and he has heard about our work, and he has contacted me recently, and we had a few exchanges. And there was one broadcast with Ramola D, where he expressed himself, and there will be a second one, and I hope that there will be other journalists interviewing him. So the issue is getting more and more known. Our work is getting more and more known, and quite frankly, once as we are more and more known, the issue is more and more known, the cause is more and more known, we will also have more weight to negotiate with other universities to do this kind of cooperation. So we will succeed. We have already gotten offers. We'll just need a few more donations so that we can enact these projects. And regarding the universities we're currently working with, as we said, we will find out what happened, and we will look very, very closely at these results, and find, first of all, an explanation for them, and then also a solution so that we can get more conclusive results very shortly. So, so it's not all it's not all black. It's we're just telling you the state of affairs, basically.
Absolutely. And I've also found a question in the chat again, asking us to explain if we intend to live with these chips until the end of our lives. Well, of course not. And Melanie has already had many removed. And you remember that her inner thighs were being burned by entire chip networks, and she had parts of those already removed. But the other thing that needs to be said is that if it's hard to find somebody who's who's willing to make accurate measurements of RFID chips, it's even harder to find doctors who are willing to remove them, because doctors are actually at the heart of the implantation process. So you need to find an honest doctor, and you need to find a doctor who's not going to put in new chips when he's removing old ones, okay? So that's even harder to do. And yes, we're also trying to find, doctors who are trustworthy. And I have also tried to reach out to doctors, and I've created some interest, and that work is ongoing. But it's actually not that hard, not that easy to find doctors. What I do have is a stack of cases where victims have approached doctors. Doctors lied. Doctors have falsified, including X-rays, MRIs, and other scans. Sometimes it was the scan of another person. I think even Karen Melton-Stewart reported something like that, she was given something, or they almost gave a scan for another person. So the amount of corruption and criminality that we are dealing with is absolutely astounding, And
that is true. And to add to this is that the victim James Walbert, whose court case was shown in this documentary In Search of Mind Control, which he won. I heard him say on a radio show that he, even after having won his court case, he traveled high and low the United States looking for a surgeon that would remove his implants, and they were clearly visible on his MRI. And I remember hearing him say that one of the doctors said, well, quite frankly, this is a government chip, and I will not touch it. I will not remove it. And quite frankly, I don't think that you will find any other surgeon who will do this in this country, at least. So this is the situation we're dealing with.
Yeah.
But of course, we will not, we do not intend to live with these non-consensual implants until the end of our lives. We also intend to establish the proof, go to court, and we also intend to have appropriate EU legislation created to ban this kind of weapons and technologies that are used against ordinary citizens.
Mm.
So there's a lot still to do, and we will not give up. And I'm sure that we will find a solution. And the first process is to establish the scientific proof that they are there, go to court, and then the second step is to go with the group of victims and have them removed, of course. This time with their consent.
Absolutely. But I also have to say that when I hear these rather critical questions, it's typically outsiders who also are not tortured, and they don't factor in that we need to do, frankly, the fundamental research investigations into formally classified technology, just because we have a couple of psychiatric or cases or psychopathic degenerates running amok in the intel agencies and the militaries. So we would not have this problem, we would not have to do this research if these mostly men, by the way, would not be so utterly degenerate. So the question arises at some point, how much can we be asked to do? Right? Because we have Holocaust victims. Can you ask the people in Auschwitz, while they're being gassed, to investigate what precise form of mustard gas it is, who's manufacturing it, try to stop the gas, funnels from actually pumping this into the room, try to survive, and then bring court cases as a Nuremberg 2.0 all in one go? It's a bit too much, right? It's a bit too much. And at some point, I start to lose my patience with the intel agencies, with the militaries, and these criminal psychopaths also in the judiciary and the hospitals. And I think at some point we need to have actually help from the organizations and institutions in the government that have been set up to protect citizens. The military has never, ever been set up to assault its own population. Yet, when you look at history, that's most of the time what militaries and intel agencies did. That's their main job, to assault their own population. And at some point we have to ask, could we please kick out and ideally shoot in the head, my personal option, in military tribunals, these total bastards who are doing this? Because another thing another thing that you need to know is that we already have a victim case, and I don't want to say who it is, who had implants removed, and then the intel agencies broke in and put them back in. What are you going to do? Are you going to pay for surgery after surgery while these dickheads are using your taxpayers' money to keep putting chips in and take it as a joke, and take your body to be a training ground for their little intel grunts to teach them how to put in chips? Because that's also a fact. That's an actual victim case,
That's a very important point. I mean, we must not forget that this all is public money.
Yeah,
that is,
exactly.
basically used in black projects. But it's the public who is paying for all this. And also, if you have a lot of interventions because you have to remove these body implants, well, I mean, the health system, we have public health system, it's all public money.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
I mean, we really need an international investigation here and look into this, because, I mean, I do not think that most citizens would like the idea, if they finally understand that this is really going on, that their income tax is used to, put this technology in people, maybe friends or family members, maybe even people they know, to torture them with technologies and to place these implants into their body they've never given their consent for. And that is basically funded all by public money. So it's really a huge corruption going on here. And so we also need brave journalists that finally, investigate this and expose these crimes, because these are war crimes. And if you care about your family members, your children, your grandchildren, then we all need to band together and stand up now and demand our governments to investigate this and to put an end to this.
Yeah.
Quite frankly. So
absolutely.
yes, even if you don't see us every day, these are the things we're working on daily.
Yeah.
Also with our politicians to investigate this and create appropriate legislation. So
exactly. Yeah, and I guess the other thing that has to be borne in mind is that while we're working and doing all this, we are being tortured. So, for example, I had to relocate. I moved house recently, and now in my new place, I'm not being machine gunned horizontally anymore from my neighbors, but my head is being battered nonstop by machine gun shots, which seem to come vertically from above. So either something has been implanted into my ceiling already, or I'm being actually gunned from satellites. right? As there was already the legislation proposed in California to ban satellite terrorism. Well, it hasn't been banned, and satellite terrorism, proliferates as a result. So imagine under these conditions trying to do this stuff. But anyway, I think we should say that we did get somewhere, and at least I always say at some point we're going to deplete their bullshit arsenals. So at some point we will know every single one of their tricks, and we will have found a solution. But we really need to step up. And I'm most concerned, for example, Frederic Laroche has got a case at the 29th of November, and there's no production line measurement, that I trust right now where he could go. And I think that's not acceptable. So we need to really step on the accelerator and try to get this, done. And that's what we will be working towards over the coming weeks.
And we can only achieve this with your support.
Absolutely. So exactly, bear with us.
A little bit helps. I'm not addressing myself so much to the victims because they're often financially depleted. Although I think 10 euros, 20 euros, everybody can spend. But maybe you have relatives or also people that are not victims, but that have become aware of this problem and would like to support us with our efforts. That would be ideal if we have people that take this issue seriously and who would also, that are maybe not victims yet, but who would not like their children or their grandchildren fall victim to this. So
exactly.
Advance.
Yeah, so I guess this is all we can say today. Anyway, the battle continues, and we most certainly, every single time we have a setback, my reaction is not to just sit back and mope. It's to just go at it even harder. And what I really want to do is I want to recruit more people who are willing to launch these sort of projects in their own cities and universities around the US and Europe or wherever they are in the world, because these are international crimes being conducted worldwide. So anyway, I think this is it from me this week. Melanie, do you have some final words?
No, this was what we wanted to bring to you today. And of course, we will be back with more news. If we get a donation, we will of course thank you and let you know, thank the donors. And also, I will look into other collaborations with other universities, as you said before. We will also keep you posted on this. So thank you.
Thank you, and
for your attention, for your
take care, and bye-bye. We will be back. Bye for now.
Bye.